Welcome to the RevRoom. I'm your host, Rachel Bryant. Join me each episode as we discuss the strategies of top marketing practitioners, uncovering the tactics that transform ideas into revenue. Whether you're a seasoned marketer or an aspiring leader, the RevRoom is your go-to source for actionable advice and industry trends. So grab a coffee, get comfy, and enjoy this episode. Hey, welcome back to the RevRoom. Today, we're tackling something that's important to how B2B companies think about growth: the evolution of customer marketing as a strategic revenue driver. Look, we all know customer marketing used to live in its own little corner, focused on advocacy and adoption. But the most successful companies have figured out it's actually a powerful engine for revenue growth when you get it right. And by right, we mean aligning marketing, customer success, and product teams around shared revenue goals, not just collecting testimonials and case studies and driving adoption on the platform. We're joined by Brittany Dawson from AlphaSense, who's going to share exactly how she's transformed customer marketing into a revenue-generating machine. We'll break down the metrics that matter, dive into the partnerships you need to build, and show you how to scale these strategies across your customer base, all with real examples you can actually use. No theoretical frameworks or shelf-worthy strategies here, just practical insights on turning your customer marketing function into a serious revenue driver. So let's get going. Well, welcome everybody. We're very excited about today's podcast. I have an expert and a deep experience, I would say, right, Brittany, in customer marketing. And we're really excited to talk about how that impacts the revenue engine and maybe the forgotten piece of it. Let's move beyond just advocacy and usage in our platforms and move to how do we work with our customers more to drive the engine of revenue in the organization. So we're excited to have you on, Brittany. Thank you for joining us. Why don't you introduce yourself to the audience and let them know a little bit about you?
Yeah. Hi, world. Brittany Dawson here. Excited to have this conversation today. I'm located just outside of Minneapolis here in Minnesota. So excited that the wind chill will be -30 this weekend.
Yes.
But I think it's cold around the world. So, or in the US anyways. So excited to get back to springtime sometime soon. But anyways, yeah. So I've had various roles in customer marketing or focused on customers. It started with being at Thomson Reuters, and then where I focused more on adoption and product launches. And then it went into at Anaplan, I did customer demand generation. So that was really focused on the revenue engine. And then I went to a smaller company, and that's where I started the customer advocacy engine there. And then I kind of did the same thing at my new role where I'm also starting customer advocacy and also building that even more when it comes to upsell and life cycle and growth. So a lot going on within the customer marketing world. So excited to chat about it because I've had many different lenses, many different roles, and I feel like there's just one big full circle of where I'm at today. So excited to chat about all of it.
That's great. Well, we're excited to dig into it and talk a little bit about that evolution and some of the ways that you've brought some new and innovative thinking to the roles that you were just describing. So, this is great. Okay,
Awesome.
So one of the things we do here at the Revenue Room, the Rev Room, is that everybody brings their favorite drinking vessel to share maybe a story or something. I always share a new one here. I'm starting to run out of mugs in my cabinet. By the way, I thought that would be hard to do, but we've got lots of episodes going here at the Rev Room. So today I have my Hustle Juice mug.
Love it. Love it.
Which really is, I always say that pretty much everything you see and experience with myself is all artificially induced through caffeine. So there you go.
Love that.
What about you, Brittany?
Sure.
What'd you bring today?
Okay, so I have Tinkerbell, and then on the back it says mornings aren't magical. And so the story behind this mug is I got it at Disney World, obviously, when I ran the Disney full marathon. This is 13, 14, a long time ago. I had a different body at that point. But as many people know, or may not know, marathon training schedules are a lot. And sometimes if they're over the summer, the heat, you have to get up early. And
Yeah.
so, mornings are still not magical after that. And I did not gain a love for mornings after that. And so, yeah, I'm just not a morning person there. There's a fun fact. I just mornings aren't magical to me.
See, I am a morning person, so I love
Okay.
the quiet in the morning, and I can get out of bed and hit the ground, not literally running, but just,
Yeah.
figuratively running. But yeah, I do. My husband is not a morning person, so we have that sort of opposite. He's a night owl, so he likes to stay up
Okay.
late and do things. So
Yeah.
you are our
Yeah.
second guest with a Disney-based mug. Daryl
Love.
Alfonso, who was on our episode last time, he brought one from Disneyland. So
Okay.
we've got a theme running here. So
Yeah.
I'm here for it.
Yeah. I mean,
Great.
Disney knows how to run the swag store. You leave a
Oh,
ride, there's there's
no doubt
something you
about
can
it.
buy any way you turn, and it's going to be like marked up 20 times. But
Yes. No doubt about it. They've done a great job
yes,
with marketing and merchandising,
exactly.
of
There you
course.
go.
Yes,
Exactly.
yes. Well, let's dig in a little bit to customer marketing, and you talk a little bit about some of the roles that you've been in and the companies you've worked for. Um, Can you tell us a little bit about how you have seen the role sort of evolve over time from that traditional advocacy to more of a revenue driving function?
Yeah. So yeah, like I mentioned in my intro, I've seen all walks of life. I think every time you have a conversation with a customer marketer, you're like, okay, what does that mean for you? What does that mean for your company? Because it can mean a wide range of things. And I think that's also evolving with the way our consumers are evolving, right? So
Mm,
um I think there was a focus on, you know, prospecting and having the voice of the customer in those motions. And now what's happening in B2B SaaS is customers are where the growth is. And so now you see that,
mm,
okay, we have to the ability with those customer experts. How can we create campaigns and programs to capitalize on the expertise that we have? So it's definitely been an interesting evolution. Um, and I would say as customer marketers, we are evolving as ourselves and the skills that we need. I think we're very personable people. We are connectors. I had a previous manager, Kellen Young, good shout out to her. I had to do a tilt test if you've ever done those personal
no.
evaluations, a tilt.
Oh, I've done a lot of
Um,
those though. Okay.
yeah,
Yes.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And we're connectors. Is always where the customer marketing
Yes.
people would end up. And I think
Hmm.
we know how to relate to people and bringing that continue to evolving that and capitalizing on that skill set has been really cool. So we just kind of have to go where the wind is going. And right now the wind is going towards how do we capitalize on building adoption, building to loyalty, and then building that to expansion and continued growth. And so it's just this big circle that's starting to connect everything together.
Yeah. How does that look different today than it did maybe even 5, 10 years ago when you first started? Maybe not first started, but when you were getting really ramped up in this space.
Yeah. I think the way you're measured and the way you execute on programs are changing. I think not only for customer marketers, but marketers in all practices, like how you use technology to capitalize on your programs, drive efficiency, reach the audience in the right way, as well as the metrics and the data you use to support all of that. Data is just becoming the most critical thing. And so I think before it was kind of all about that one-on-one engagement, being as personable as you can be, reach out to that customer if they're on your list. But now going into advocacy into a larger life cycle and upsell campaigns, you need data to figure out who to reach and how to get there. And so that's definitely evolving how you practice all this. And then with that comes all this cross-functional alignment that needs to happen.
Sure.
So really what's has evolved is there used to be the marketing tech stack and then like the revenue org tech stack, and those things were kind of separate. And now that's all definitely merging together. So having an interest at the decisions on the CS side versus the sales side and what tools are in the entire company's tech stack and how all those talk to each other is becoming even more critical than I had in the young Brittany days.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Um, that's an interesting point you just made. And our previous episode was with some MOPS thought leaders
Yes.
and
Yeah.
one of the things they talked about is how MOPS is really, my word is more becoming like a linchpin in the revenue engine and in the strategy, in the way teams work together, like to your point, right, on the cross-functional side. And um, I wonder how you have even evolved as you talk about that in your relationship with the MOPS team and like that MOPS organization and how you're coordinating with them on making sure that you have the data you need to be successful in what you're trying to do in market.
Yeah, I think they're probably one of my top key stakeholders when executing programs, just to understand. Because if you think about it, like demand gen, they their engine is built with the MOPS team, and I think um, customer marketing is still kind of catching up to demand gen in a
Mm,
way, and understanding like, okay, hey, here's how here's how retention operates. What does that mean? So something that we've been constantly working with our MOPS team on is how to get renewal attribution into the existing attribution flow. So when I started, that wasn't necessarily a case, and so now that we're building programs that really impact retention, we need to have, since we're an attribution shop, have to have that influence in there. So that's been interesting. And then they're kind of the keepers of the data, right? They understand, the database health, and so you have to constantly work with them to ensure that we have the data we need to execute our programs.
yeah, that's a really good
Yeah.
point.
Yeah.
Um, let's talk about some examples of some things that you've done in your roles, and specifically, can you share any examples of like how you've transformed um, an from an advocacy program, into something that's more strategic and even more sort of like growth engine, revenue engine supporting?
Yeah. Where to start? So when I started at AlphaSense, I walked into kind of a advocacy here was producing reviews and producing case studies. That was what customer marketing was. In the last 2 years, that has evolved into many different things and is no longer just that. So understanding how to do life cycle programs. So that's definitely a part of building adoption, as well as growth programs, community and event programs. But what's been really cool is with the evolution of the customer marketing tech stack, we're actually able to use a tool called Champion where we manage all our advocates. And within that, there is the ability to track job changes. And I know there's job changing tracking capabilities across many platforms, but the advantage to this is it's within advocacy. So knowing that our best users, our best customers, knowing when they changed a job will provide so many opportunities for the CS team as well as for the sales team. So being able to take that information and create a revenue engine from advocates is so powerful and such a differentiator for us. So we're building that right now, but it took launching that advocacy program, building that with Champion, and we're working on integrating that into Salesforce to get that through engine. So really excited about that, because that's definitely going to be a game changer.
Yeah, that's super cool.
Yeah.
Um, can you talk a little bit about how you're approaching life cycle marketing? You mentioned that, and like, what does that look like at AlphaSense today, or and how is that maybe different than what you've looked at before?
Yeah. So the last two customer marketing jobs I've had, within the first 6 months, you're building a customer journey. You're doing interviews across the organization, including products, CS, who engages with customers, what are they doing, at what stages, what are the friction points.
Mhm.
And so that's where we started, is just getting the state of the state. Um, and if it's not alone. I'm sure I'm not alone in this scenario, but there were a lot of ad hoc. It depends. The customer journey quickly gets very complicated. So our approach recently here at AlphaSense in the last like year and a half, and shout out to Brooke Wilson on my team who kind of manages all this from the beginning, was starting with trial and just starting
Mm.
at the beginning of the journey and doing a very detailed map there. And then Maureen Robs joined our team and really excited about that. And so now we're building on to retention plays and the renewal playbooks, and really kind of just taking it stage by stage at this point, because it does get complicated. And breaking it down there that way has been very successful for us.
Yeah. What sorts of things are you doing? You talked about this, sort of those renewal and retention campaigns, and like we talked on previously about having like a work back strategy from a renewal date and those sorts of things. And not that people don't have them, but I have been and worked with lots of customers who don't think about it that way and have that sort of strategy up front. They almost are more reactive to, oh my gosh, the renewal date's coming. What are we going to do? Um, can you just give some examples of some of the things that you're doing when you think about that? I mean, as overarching as the life cycle piece that you just talked about, but some of those really specific points in time during the life cycle. What are some of the things that you're doing? What are the strategies that you're putting in place there?
Um, yeah, I think the first one that comes to mind for me is kind of working very closely with the CS team and understanding what their current renewal playbook looks like. So this past year, we were working on the initiative to help with efficiency on the account management side. So how can we, digitally support some of the customers rather than having a one-to-one AM um, assignment? How can we help with like a one to many customers? We called it our Tech Touch initiative and basically it's a digital renewal initiative. And they're looking at the life cycle, and we had adoption standpoint. So at any point, what is the baseline adoption? What should that look like? And then from there, create a low adoption playbook, a moderate
Mm.
adoption playbook, and a high adoption playbook to understand how can we ensure if they're not going to have an account manager outreaching to them as regularly as some of our like higher ARR customers, how can we create content that's relevant to them based on the usage that they have? And then from there, we also created, based on the usage that they have, what are the notifications for renewal coming up? And there are some levers within that of like, okay, 90 days before renewal, what does a low usage renewal playbook look like? And building very custom messaging from that. There was a queue base, so we do have like other account managers managing those accounts if there are some like major red flags or they do want to meet and engage. But we did have that support within the CS tool where we created the playbooks that could kind of have those levers before that contract date actually happens.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think something you talked about just early on in that explanation, all the tactical stuff that's awesome. I'm sure those are great tidbits for people, but a big piece of what I know you are sort of staked your career growth on is that cross-functional sort of partnership with CS and sales and others across the organization. How are you building those relationships? Like, how do you find it effective? What do you find effective in order to build relationships like that across the organization from a customer marketing lens?
Yeah, I think it's, the minute you get into that role, having those one-on-one introductory conversations and knowing like, here's my mission, what's your mission? How do we partner and align on those key missions that you may have? And what are your key KPIs? And how can I support your KPIs? And just having
Mhm.
that frequent engagement. The classic have biweekly touch points or monthly touch points. At this point, we have like I think it's every 3 weeks we're meeting with CS leaders to give them details on programs that will help their teams reach their goals, right? AMs are really focused on their renewals, their growth, their adoption. Okay, what are we doing as customer marketers to help that? What are we doing to help identify advocates and help them collect quotes so that they can put those into QBRs? So always continuing to communicate how you are helping their KPIs. And if you're not getting
Mhm.
that information, just ask. People
Yeah.
love to answer questions, right? Love to tell you about what they do. Um, so that's at the leadership level, but I think also our traditional customer advocates, right? Marketers, we have to have that one-on-one relationship as well with the AM. So there is a top down and a bottom up approach. And so having those relationships with account managers to understand what their day to day looks like is really important as well. Because, we still have the best practice if you reach out to a customer for a speaking engagement or a case study or quote approval, what have you. you want that account manager's buy-in. So let them know that you want
Yeah.
them to be a key partner in all of that. So um, in the short, I think there's large strategic initiatives that you want to have that leadership buy-in and that leadership trust. But then there's also the day-to-day, like human-centric driven strategy, just to really connect with others across the team, that they know that you're a resource, that you're also engaging with customers is important.
Yeah. I mean, it sounds a lot like, I come from more of a demand gen strategy lens. And so like it's very similar to on the demand gen side where you're really having that same conversation with your sales counterparts, right? And really trying
Mhm.
to understand what are their goals, what are their KPIs so that you're aligned on those things and marketing's not off, demand gen's not off going in and doing things that don't help with those areas, right? Or
Yeah.
lift up areas that they really struggle more at than others. So
Mhm.
that's really good. I think that's if anything, I think if you're newer to marketing or you've been maybe struggling or stuck, like what I have found is the best way to sort of either unstick or learn or really elevate yourself in an organization is start asking questions to people outside of your team.
Mhm.
Sit with them on phone calls, right? I'm sure you've probably done this, right? Like you've sat in on CS calls or like shadowing people, really understanding what it's like to be in their shoes.
Yeah.
It just brings a whole different lens. It changes the way you approach your day to day because now you're thinking beyond just what I have to do every day to make my bonus or, make sure my boss,
Yeah.
is happy with what I'm doing, things like that. So,
Yeah.
what are some of the challenges that you've faced in some of those, approaches to the cross-functional, partnerships and maybe with CS or, things like that?
Yeah. It's funny. As you were just talking through that, I was like, oh, this one scenario that keeps crossing my mind is day to day, when you think about it, is like marketers are always trying to create those lists, understand who they're targeting and what campaigns. And sometimes we also receive feedback from the CS org that they want to understand who we're targeting when. And so sometimes that means sending an Excel sheet with a list of accounts and names and either opting them in or out. We
Mhm.
hate it. AMs hate it. So it's just trying to understand, like, I remember recently it was like a review gen campaign with G2, right? Like the AMs wanted to know who we're reaching out. So at first that was, okay, let's review the list. Who's it going to? How are you pulling that list? And then as that exercise has evolved and we showcase, this is how the list is being served. We're using NPS or the other data points or these types of engagements to create that list. Um, then it's become more of an FYI because we've kind of built that trust. Like, okay, this type of review gen campaign or this type of other campaign, this is who it is. Um, so that's kind of how we've overcome is overshare transparency and how you're building our
Yeah.
program and how you're engaging with customers. Um, so that over time it becomes more efficient for both people on the side of the aisle.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and so that's one scenario that just came into my mind as you were kind of talking there. And so yeah.
That's a great example. How often are you like talking with customers one on one, right? Or in a group setting or anything like that, interacting with them to better understand and help, your programs be more effective?
Yeah, so one thing we do for our advocacy program, so we ask all throughout the life cycle if someone wants to join an advocacy program. There's, follow up on an NPS, or they leave a review, or they've had a good phone call, or we see a good quote come from Gong.
Mhm.
We're always asking, or on our website, at customer visits, there's some customization there to like, join the advocacy program. Um, so they're coming in all different channels. The first step, once they complete the form to join the advocacy program and tell us what they're willing to do, is an interview or like a conversation with Jenna Feldman on my team, who's amazing. And she's really engaging with the customers, building those relationships that this is not just a program. This is actually something that, AlphaSense really wants to create a relationship with you. Um,
Mm.
so we're meeting with them constantly through that, as well as anytime we need to do that case study or that speaking engagement, we're meeting with them. But one thing we are doing to ensure that we use customers' time as much as we can is like with the power of Gong, right? Like you're able to
Mhm.
listen to customers more and more. And unfortunately, it's getting kind of creepy at the same time with technology. But with some good ethics, being able to kind of understand and, have truly listen to the customer. So one tool we're also implementing right now is called Laudable. So
Oh,
to scale the number of quotes that we have. So we get a feed every day of like calls that happened, and it's coming from Gong, and then being able to kind of understand like, okay, here are the good quotes, and then we work with the AM to follow up with a customer to ask like, hey, we heard you said some amazing things. Um, so really excited about that process. And this week we got some really cool quotes being approved for some new products that we
mhm.
just launched. Um, so to answer your question, sorry, there is that one-on-one outreach, but then there's also some like listening tools that we're using.
Yeah, that's fantastic because obviously you want what you're doing to match with customer needs, or what's impactful to them,
Mhm.
not just the busy work of email,
Yeah.
whatever.
Yep.
So yeah, that's important. I think that's really great. How are you incorporating some of those things that you're hearing into your activities? And, like, share a little bit, like, how do you use the quotes or, where are you using your advocacy stories besides, obviously, the case studies you might use in a sales process or something like that?
Yeah, it's interesting because there's no magic to like how to use voice of customer. And I think we have to keep up
Mhm.
with like society and how all our brains work, right? So like an active conversation right now is like, what is the future of long form case studies? And what is the future of really reviews as well? Like so, there's AI driven reviews out there, as we all know. And so I
Yeah.
recently read a post on LinkedIn that was like, people want to see like screenshots of the original comment in whatever platform, if it's Reddit, if it's LinkedIn, an email, and make it as authentic as possible. Um, so I don't have some magic answer of like, this is the winning format, but the way that we're using it today is, having that quote library for the revenue org to pull in where is needed, having those case studies evolve in pitch decks and our business case decks and those logos. And then
Mhm.
obviously using, our pages on our website to have those in all nurtures in various ways and across our website. So all very classic. But
Yeah.
what's also cool with this new Laudable tool, sorry, this is becoming a Laudable testimonial, but it's on top of my mind right now. So I hope that's okay. But
Yeah.
we're creating a Slack bot for users, or like Laudable has a Slack bot that we're implementing. Um, so if you're, Rachel, the sales rep, you're able to ask like, I'm going to walk into this vertical and this persona, provide me a quote that relates to that. And so then we'll
Mm.
be able to give them real time information on approved quotes that they can bring with them to the room. Um, Full transparency, we don't have an ROI measurement of that, or
Yeah.
to be discovered ROI aspect. We'll have a frequency of like how many queries we're given. Um, but I think we're trying to make it more authentic and moment in time as possible.
I like
Yeah.
that. I mean, we're always having new tools we can leverage and think about, and our team here at Invert is always looking at different use cases for bots of some sort, right? Or AI, agents, and how are you utilizing those things? That's really great. Those are great use cases right there to be able to do
Mhm.
some of that. Just even just shortening the time for someone to find things that support a
Mm.
conversation that they're about to
Yeah.
have, I think is really great. So that's awesome.
Mhm. Yeah.
Um, we talked a little bit at the beginning about that mapping of the customer journey. And um, obviously that's the foundational sort of structure you need in order to build a great customer marketing program. Um, how do you how are you approaching sort of the orchestration of those touch points? And so you've got your journey mapped. You've got different touch points you need to, interact with the customer at. You've got CS, you got AEs, you've got like how are you approaching that orchestration and like documentation? How are you functioning through that? How is the organization understanding who's touching who, when, and how often, and things like that?
Yeah. Lucid Chart, Lucid Spark, whatever Lucid
Mm.
platform you want to think of is your best friend, right? So
Oh, we nerd
being
out over here on the
oh
Lucid,
my
so we hear
gosh,
you.
ability
Yeah.
to zoom in and zoom out is kind of cool. So it's creating those lanes and using the arrows to connect all those dots and those boxes and just really having multiple working sessions with stakeholders along the way. And I think having those stakeholders from the beginning is also
Mm.
important. So um, with every customer program that I've launched, it's kind of having this like slide that shows like, okay, this is what we're trying to achieve. These are our stats, and making sure everyone's on the same page, and then pulling that in with parallel with the lucid chart of like, okay, this is what we want to achieve. Here's how we're going to get there. Here's the channel. Um,
Mhm.
I will have to say, and I'm curious on your perspective too. Like, there are open questions of like, what platform are we sending this information from, and what
Sure.
platform does that team own, right? So like there's the outreach, there's Gamesite, there's Marketo, like whatever tools you have in your tech stack, all of them can communicate an email to a customer. So I think it's also really having that strategic conversation with those key stakeholders um, across all those teams to understand like who's going to send what. Um, is it coming across one-on-one? Is it coming across scale? And what's the differences in those messages? And so in that lucid chart is also a big old picture of what that email is going to say, so that everyone's kind of aligned on the different purposes of those engagements.
I think that's brilliant. Yeah, because to your point, there's so many ways to touch a customer in different teams that may do it. So to have that very specifically mapped out and to know what the platform is going to do it,
Yeah.
is really important. So yeah,
Yeah.
that's really great.
Yeah.
Um, how are you creating okay, so let's shift gears a little bit because we're talking about the revenue engine and right driving customer interaction to build and grow that revenue. What kind of data points are you looking at? And what are your like what kind of success metrics are you ensuring that you're looking at and really kind of matter most for customer market?
Yeah, I think the gold star that we have that we're all chasing here at AlphaSense is attribution. So we have a custom model that feeds different things. And like I mentioned earlier, it's evolving as we build more and more um, customer programs so that we have not only upsell and cross sell, um, and then net new customers in that attribution model. How can we get the retention metric within that? So that's how we're measured. What's really cool is from an advocacy connecting to that attribution model. Um, with the champion tool, we're tracking every engagement with a customer. This quarter, we're going to build based on those interactions. It's going to feed into Salesforce, which will feed into our model so that we can even get advocacy engagements part of that attribution model. So really, really excited about
Yeah.
that. Um, I haven't done that in my career, so I'm just to see how this all pans out, to be
Yeah,
honest,
that's
but
great.
excited
Yeah.
to have that number because I haven't had that number in the advocacy sense in ever. Um, and then one other metric that we were really focused on, so did an event series this past year, and we analyzed what are the growth rates of if they engaged with that event post that event, and we found that it took 6 months based on our um, opportunity days to close. It takes time, right? So, what is that win rate and what is that growth based on that engagement as well? So there is that like soft influence numbers that we do report on. So even for like the advocacy program, those who are in the program versus those who are not. Um, if you are in the program, you have 4x ARR versus those who are not. So just having those like soft influence numbers are also helpful. And then we're obviously focusing on adoption metrics, right? So this isn't something core on the marketing side, but it also communicates the values of our programs across the organization. So just this week, working with our ops team, again, make them your best friends. We were able to look at all the marketing touch points across one of our large enterprise accounts, and we were able to see, okay, those who engaged had 4x likely to reach our adoption metric than those who did not.
Mm.
So
Hmm.
um, just having those little stats of like X growth, X that. So, but then there's always the standard of like, win rates, attribution, um, influence that you all like to have. Um, so we haven't had all the magic numbers um, within us. So I think for those listening, it's just pick a metric and have that crawl aspect and then keep going and just like keep everyone's always going to have a question. You're never going to reach like, okay, we're done analyzing the data. There's always going to be more questions and more things that come up. And so, how does marketing influence the retention rate? So now that we launched that digital renewal program, pilot last year, we had 100%, retention for that first quarter. And now, 2025, much more coming. So it's always understanding what that retention rate is for those who engage, and you're not going to have that magic report. So, um, launch spiel, a lot of metrics. You're never going to be done. So just always finding, what are the most impactful? What do leadership care about? And starting with those and then continue to optimize them as you go along.
Yeah, that's really great. What, NRR, net retention rate, big numbers that a lot of companies are starting to think about elevating as one of their even like executive type um, metrics. That's just more front facing, which is always kind of interesting to me because I would think it would always be one. But
Mhm.
I think we talked about this earlier, but like we, I've seen so many companies get so focused on net new acquisition, and really, obviously you have to grow your net new base, right? Like a company doesn't survive without it, but you also don't survive if you're not focused on your own customer base. I've had, I mean, gosh, just in the last probably month, because you're in that annual sort of cycle and people are starting to set their strategies for the new year and all of that, get ready for kickoffs, all the things. But I've heard multiple customers of mine, clients of mine say, well, our executive team is really wanting us to shift more of our focus or a more balanced effort and focus on stopping the churn. And I'm like, okay, like, where did we just like come up with this? But I get it. Like, sometimes you get so focused down one path. Um, I'm rambling now, but I suppose my follow-up question to what you were saying is like that NRR number has got, I'm sure, is a big target for not just you, but also CS and the AE. So like, how are you creating unified metrics and like KPIs that you're moving there, like health metrics and things like that? How do you do that together cohesively as well? And like not fighting over credit, but like as a more cohesive sort of team that's working on retaining customers.
Yeah, I think it also goes back to like speaking the same data points and making sure that we're referencing. So
Mhm.
that slide that I talk about, that's kind of my gold standard slide at starting any project is this like one easy slide everyone can comprehend. If anyone opens this deck, they can see what we're talking about. But also a good point of that is also having a link to the source of the data to understand what are we all talking the same thing?
Yeah.
And making sure that we're referencing the right information. And then that leads to a conversation of like, okay, this is how this program will impact that number. This is how your role will impact that number, and making sure we're going to the same thing. Um, and so just having that continuous open conversation on like, what are your key KPIs? And here's how I'm helping that. Here's how you're helping that. And these are your roles, like on the lucid chart. Okay, here's the swim
Yes.
lanes, here's the comms, and this is how we're all contributing to that. You're never going to get away with like the source and the attribution and hey, we need to grow it here where everyone wants to grow their stake in the ground. Totally get that. But I think there is a shift of understanding like all the systems are talking to each other. We're all supporting each other. Is it perfect by any means? No.
Yeah.
But I think just working on those small little projects and getting through that um,
Yeah.
quarter by quarter, just
Yes.
keep working at it.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
optimizing, improving, right, learning as you go, and,
Yeah.
yeah, I think that's really smart. That's, I think your point around the swim lanes on the lucid chart, really understanding, here are my roles and responsibilities and your roles and responsibilities, and nobody's here to, like, necessarily take credit, for, the ultimate goal of the organization, which is to keep, retain, and grow our revenue, right?
Yeah. And
Yeah.
I know we're so internal focused, but like the customer doesn't care if that is coming from a AM
Exactly.
or marketing. Like you really gotta get that muscle out and like think, okay, what is the customer experience here? If we all just want to keep contacting them and it's like, okay, like that's not going to benefit us. And so one thing that we're working on is launching a communication console. And so building that engine here of understanding, okay, here's all the comms that are going out, here's all the tools, here's the metrics on like the comms that we are sending. So that's something we're working on. Nothing hard far as results on that yet, but just trying to build the bridges is kind of where we're headed
Yes.
there.
Yeah. Yeah. That's really good advice. Okay, Brittany, we're gonna wrap here pretty soon.
Love
So
it.
what we'd like to do to sort of end the show is to ask our guests to provide a pro tip. So is there like a single tangible piece of advice that you can give our listeners that they could walk away with today and like go do and start doing as they think about building and growing their customer marketing function?
Yeah. I think it goes back to like our ops conversation at the beginning. Just have an ops friend. And if some small organizations don't have the resources that, some larger organizations may not have, but say, pose your question. What are you trying to answer? And just start slacking that, emailing that around to see who's able to provide that data for you, who's able to have that analytical brain. Everyone's right or left. So find that person or that organization that's able to help you answer those questions because that's going to help show your value to the organization. It will optimize your programs. And so, slowly but surely build that muscle to just start posing those analytical questions and build those reports. I think that's pretty critical to not only starting net new things and getting your programs attached to revenue. It's also just a great skill to have overall because I'm learning a lot from my analytical friends for sure.
Yes. Yes. Yeah, that's a great call out.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Brittany. We really appreciate you being on the show and what great
Yeah.
information and insights you have. And we just wish you best of luck and all of your future endeavors there at Alpha Sense and anywhere else that you go. Maybe we'll have you back in a little while and talk about all the things you've been doing and some of the other tools that you might implement and look at.
Awesome. Well, thank you for having me. And same to Inverta. Always a big Inverta fan. Always had been a big Inverta fan. So thank you for having me. And this was awesome.
Awesome. Thanks, Brittany.
Awesome. Bye.
Thanks for tuning in to the Rev Room today. We hope you enjoyed this episode. For more, be sure to subscribe and leave us a review. Don't forget to follow Inverta on LinkedIn for more updates and exclusive content. That's Inverta, Inverta. Have a question or a topic you'd like us to cover? Reach out and let us know. Until next time, keep innovating and driving that revenue growth. See you next time.